Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sportsballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the Sportsballers podcast. My name is Cory Puffett and I'm joined as always by Eric Meyer and Evan Ash. This is episode 136. It is March 24th and the NCAA tournament is well underway. We got through the first two rounds this past weekend and it was action-filled. It was a great first two rounds. Honestly, probably the most exciting opening weekend of the NCAA tournament that I've seen in a long time.
Certainly in 2 years.
Certainly at least in 2 years, but I would argue even longer than that. That was a really fun first weekend. So we're going to get into that today, of course. We're going to give some shout-outs to some notable people within our bracket challenge. We got 24 people join our bracket challenge, which is awesome. So I don't know if we have 24 listeners for this podcast, but
I don't think we do.
But we had some people, including my awesome girlfriend Rashonda, reach out to some friends to join and get some numbers in our contest, which is awesome. So we'll be shouting out a few people in there. We got some NFL topics to talk about. We got some baseball to talk about. But let's go ahead and start in the association, where the trade deadline in the NBA is tomorrow at 3 p.m. So Eric, are there any big moves that look to be in the works or that you anticipate might happen?
I wouldn't expect anything earth-shattering, to be honest. I don't think you're going to see any stars moving, but there are some pretty big names that could be on the move. Namely, Lonzo Ball has been swirling as a trade rumor guy for the last few weeks. He's been a guy that the Pelicans have perhaps decided to part ways with in order to maybe build their team out a little bit differently. But he's got some value as a point guard who can defend, who has some length. He's developed into a pretty good shooter as well. He's actually, it's funny, the Wizards paid Davis Bertans, Latvian Laser as he's called, a whole bunch of money this offseason to be basically a three-point specialist, and he's shooting a lower percentage from three this year than Lonzo Ball, and they're shooting about the same volume of threes. And meanwhile, Lonzo also brings in good defense and good passing as well, and the ability to ball handle. So he's developed into a pretty good player. I wouldn't call him an all-star or anything like that, but he could absolutely be a valuable sort of swing piece, whether he's a starter or the first guy off the bench. There are some playoff teams that would have some use for him and potentially see him as a valuable backup point guard or even a starter in the right situation. So I would look out for him. He could be on the move as well. The biggest name is probably Aaron Gordon, who plays for the Orlando Magic. Most people probably don't know anybody on the Orlando Magic because that's just, who they are. It's NBA Siberia with Mickey Mouse, so it's not really
I know Victor Oladipo was with the Orlando Magic. But yes, that was a long time ago.
And then he left and got famous. So that tells you all you need to know. So Aaron Gordon is potentially an option for certain teams. There's a lot of rumors that he's potentially going to go to the Celtics. He said that he was interested in joining a contender initially, and then he kind of switched it to a place where he can build his brand, which would presumably be a big market like Brooklyn or Los Angeles. And now he's sort of waffling and saying he doesn't know if he wants to get traded, but ultimately it's not really up to him. It's a weird situation. I don't really know how Aaron Gordon fits with any contender. I don't think he's a valuable wing player. He's not that good of a shooter. I think he could be a decent small ball center, but I don't know how many teams want to go that route or need somebody like that on their roster. So it'll be interesting to see where he sticks. He's won at least one slam dunk championship. I think he might have won two. So he's obviously a really good athlete, but I don't get the hype around him nearly as much as some people do. But hey, maybe he just needs a better situation. I mean, again, playing for the Magic, it's tough to look good playing for the Magic right now, especially with all the injuries they have. They're certainly probably going to go into the tank at this point. And I guess the only other name that has come up, well, we've heard Victor Oladipo could be on the move. He's going to be a free agent after this year, so he's an expiring contract. Teams value that. That's an opportunity to go get somebody, and whether they want to re-sign him, and they would have his bird rights at that point, which means they could basically offer him any amount of money without violating any salary cap rules, regardless of how high their payroll goes. So that's a big benefit of acquiring a star via trade. Although at this point, I'm not sure you would call Victor a star anymore. He could get back to that level, but he simply hasn't been there since his injury, and obviously we wish that he would return to that level of prominence. But that might dissuade certain teams from moving the farm to get him. But even if you don't resign him, having the expiring contract is valuable because it frees up cap space for you to go get somebody else. So there could be some value there as well. And Victor's still a good player. He's still a valuable scoring option. There are plenty of teams that could make good use of his skill set. So we'll see where he lands. I'm pretty sure they're going to move him. But, I mean, again, you never know. The Rockets are also fully in the tank. They, like I mentioned on our chat, they're the first franchise in history to have a 20-game winning streak and a 20-game losing streak in their history. And, well, they didn't do the 20-game winning streak this year. It was the losing streak. They are terrible, and they are probably in a tank for Cade Cunningham mode or something like that. So they certainly have every reason to want to move off of Victor Oladipo while he's still under their control and maybe make something out of him. But we'll see how that goes. And the last name that I think is Kelly Oubre, who's in a really interesting situation with Golden State because at the start of the year, Oubre was terrible. He had a terrible start to the season. We talked about that extensively on this show. But he's really turned it around the last couple of months and become a very valuable piece for Golden State. But he's also a pending free agent this year. And Golden State is in a position where do they really have a role for him come next season? Because Klay Thompson's going to be back, presumably, from his injury. They already have Andrew Wiggins locked up. So there's your shooting guard and your small forward. What position's left for Kelly Oubre? And so in order for them to make that work, either they would have to commit to a more full-time small ball style lineup, but then that leaves James Wiseman out of the mix, who they used the number 2 pick in the draft on, and they have high hopes for him developing into a pretty good player for them as well. So at that point, it's sort of, does Kelly Oubre want to be in a role where he's restricted to be a bench player? And more importantly, is Golden State willing to pay him the kind of money that he's looking for? Like I said, they acquired him in a trade, so they do have his bird rights, but they have a lot of money on the books, and they are deeply into the luxury tax situation. Plus, they will be in the repeater tax, which means the penalty will be even stiffer. So it's a matter of choice. Do they want him to be a guy that they pay perhaps $25 million a year to come off the bench and be sort of that Andre Iguodala kind of role? And is he willing to do that? Or do they somehow manage to make him a starter? Who knows? And if they decide that it's not feasible to keep him, they might move him to try to get some value for him, perhaps for somebody like Lonzo Ball.
I think I counted 3 different players that you listed as, the one other name that I've kind of heard about.
Yeah, but, I was trying to recall things in my head because I see a lot of things on Twitter, and
fair enough.
Again, it's so frustrating though because nothing's actually happened, and the thing is, the deadline's tomorrow. It's at 3 p.m. Normally, you would have expected some type of move to happen at this point, and then something else to trickle out the rest of the way. But
maybe, but you only listed 5 or 6 different names in total there, and when it's when the number of players is that scarce, that may be moved, I feel like it's more likely that all of them are going to be closer to last minute if they get done at all. Whereas where there's a lot of potential movement, you'll see some moves in the run up and then kind of a free for all in the hours leading up to. That's just kind of how the trade deadline works in most leagues. Is a lot of the deals get done, in the last hour or two before the deadline.
Yeah, and it seems like there are quite a few teams vying for each of these players to some extent, which means the teams that are trying to trade these guys are certainly willing to wait as long as possible to have them keep bidding up the price. So there's nothing wrong with using that as a negotiating tactic. And I'm sure we'll see a lot of moves, but some of them are going to be smaller moves that don't even really register, don't really move the needle. Those are the guys that, off the top of my head, I think could make a difference for some playoff teams that are trying to either get in the mix to potentially be, in that top six and avoid that playing round, or even some teams like the Clippers who are certainly a championship contender at this point, who are looking for one or two pieces to get over the top and be able to maybe beat the Lakers or the Jazz and get to the NBA Finals.
Outside of the pending trade deadline, this really would not have been a notable week in the NBA, all told, except that LeBron James suffered a really bad high ankle sprain. And as of right now, there's no timetable on his return. I haven't seen the video. I've purposefully avoided seeing the video because I don't care to see those lower leg injuries. They're always they're never pleasant to watch, and especially once I heard that James was laying on the court, basically screaming in pain. That kind of told me all I needed to know about it. So he's out indefinitely. And Eric, you've mentioned that you think that this pretty much puts the MVP out of reach for him.
Yeah, I mean, the problem was already that this is a pretty crowded field for that race. And I generally don't get caught up in MVP races, but it's, kind of the only thing to talk about right now. So other than the trade deadline, which we talked about at length already. So I think that since LeBron was really vying for this award this year, I mean, he was sort of campaigning on his own behalf, which is a little self-serving for my liking, but LeBron's LeBron. He's allowed to do whatever he wants. He's definitely earned that level of clout that he can kind of do that. But at this point, it doesn't seem like he's just going to play enough games. Like, you can't miss. This will probably be at least a month's worth of games, maybe 6 weeks worth, and expect to win this award, especially in an already shortened season. You're going to miss an even higher percentage than you normally would if you missed 4 to 6 weeks. And I saw the injury. I watched it happen. It wasn't like Dak Prescott's injury or Alex Smith's or anything like that. It wasn't like harrowing, but it was you could definitely see where the injury happened, where a player kind of collided with the outside of his leg, and you could see him kind of push the ankle in, and you could see where it tweaked, and definitely would sustain a very serious ankle sprain at that point. So obviously we wish LeBron the best. We want to see him healthy for the playoffs, him and Anthony Davis, so that the Lakers can contend and hopefully have a shot to repeat and defend their title. But at this point, it's about getting healthy for him. I don't think you're going to see him rush back because, like I said, he was campaigning on his own behalf to win the MVP, but I think he's more realistic that winning the MVP is not the priority. Winning a championship is. And so he's not going to try to get back on the court 3 weeks because maybe if he makes it back for an extra 3 games more than he would have, maybe they'll still give him the award. That doesn't seem likely to me.
Well, not to mention high ankle sprains are pretty serious injuries in any sport, but maybe even more so in basketball, where so much of what you're doing is lateral movement. And Rashonda mentioned to me that his ankle turned the opposite way that most ankle sprains do, which is not pleasant to think about. I mean, there was a fairly minor ankle injury in one of the NCAA tournament games this week, where a guy was dribbling with the ball, and the front of his foot basically just kind of collided with another player's foot, and he ended up twisting his ankle. Like that, I didn't want to see a replay of that even. So I definitely didn't want to see James's injury. But yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the high ankle sprains, you really shouldn't even be trying to come back in less than a month, because the chances of you aggravating it just are sky high. Now, Joel Embiid is also out right now. So do you have any predictions on who the front runner is for the MVP race at this point, with both of them most likely out of the running?
I don't have a prediction because I'll admit I don't really have the temperature of the room right now when it comes to how people feel about the award and who should win it. I know who I think should win it, and I think that's Nikola Jokic. But a lot of people have been talking about James Harden potentially being the MVP in Brooklyn because the Nets have played their best basketball in the stretch that Kevin Durant's been out. So he's kind of weaseled his way in there, and I ultimately don't think he'll win it because I think that people are going to hold what he did with the Rockets against him, where he didn't show up for the first week or so and showed up out of shape and wasn't really putting in the effort. I think that's going to count against him. I also think the fact that even though Kevin Durant hasn't been there, he's still playing on a super team with 2 other All-Stars. And that's going to still be something that's not going to sit right with the voters. They typically don't like giving the award to individuals that have multiple superstars playing with them. So I think that's going to affect him as well. Obviously, Damian Lillard's name has come up as well.
I was going to say on James Harden, I know that the award is meant to be like a year-to-year thing, but I almost feel like most improved would be more, appropriate for him to win based on how he started the season.
Well, most improved is based off of year over year.
Right, that's what I was saying. Like, I know that it's meant to be a year-to-year award, but I feel like that would be more appropriate than MVP.
Yes, he was playing his way into shape. That's the argument. But Damian Lillard's getting a lot of consideration. Dame's another guy who's benefiting from a little bit of a narrative shift because he felt like he was so ignored, and rightfully so, for a long time in Portland, that it seems like the media is almost overcorrecting that, and they're saying, well, Dame should win the MVP because look at how Portland's still staying above water despite the fact they've had all these injuries. And I'm like, okay, but that happens a lot. Like, he's not the first guy to do that, nor will he be the last. And I would say he's not even the best guy to be doing it this year. That's Nikola Jokic. And an interesting stat that usually correlates pretty highly with who wins the MVP is win shares per 48 minutes, which is an advanced stat that you can find on Basketball Reference. And the average player has a win shares per 48 minutes of 0.1. And then mathematically it makes sense because there's 240 minutes played in a basketball game, when you count for all 5 players, and then you multiply that out by however much. And that would, if everybody had 0.1, it would end up being around 50-50 as far as win percentage goes. So that would be your average player, so to speak. But Nikola Jokic's number is at 0.31, which is rarely done. It's only been done maybe 10 times in NBA history that somebody's achieved that, where his win shares are that high. So not only is he leading the league in it, which is generally giving you a pretty good shot to do this, but he's also having a historically great season with it as well.
How do you calculate win shares though?
It involves your scoring rate, your on-off numbers. Obviously, your team success is going to play a role because the idea is that your win shares should add up to your total number of wins, give or take maybe plus or minus a half a win. So we're not talking about something where it's like you can have, as a team, 62 win shares, but you only won 40 games. That's impossible. Okay. Just based off of the nature of the stat. There's obviously some wiggle room that takes into account point differential that might kind of skew things a little bit one way or the other, just a hair. But it definitely correlates the highest, not only with some of the other advanced stats that we see and that we use, but also, frankly, you can watch the games and say, this guy's having the biggest impact on whether this team's winning or not. And it definitely correlates very highly with that metric. So,
and you said that it's win shares per what now?
Per 48 minutes.
Okay.
Like, obviously that's going to correlate very highly with win shares itself. But if you miss a game or you play fewer minutes, typically the MVP race isn't determined by that because they'll usually give the benefit of the doubt to guys that play fewer games or fewer minutes because there's a chance that they didn't play the entire game because they were blowing the opponent out and they sat out the entire fourth quarter. This happened with Steph Curry in both of his MVP seasons. In fact, his first MVP season, Curry led the league in win shares per 48, but James Harden actually led the league in win shares because he played more minutes. But Curry was still clearly the better player when he was on the floor. It's just that he didn't have to be on the floor as much because they were blowing the opponent out.
Makes sense.
So that's and again, that's just sort of the general metric that seems to tie well. And I don't even think it's on purpose. I think it's just a matter. It speaks to the effectiveness of the stat as a regular season metric that this number correlates with impact And this number also correlates with wins. So people that vote on how many wins you have are going to line up with this. People who vote on stats, it's going to line up with this. So I think it just kind of comes together in a way that makes it work. I don't think people actually say, well, who's leading the league at win shares per 48 minutes? I think it just happens to be that everybody's idea of what the MVP is kind of fits under the umbrella that the stat covers. But
Gotcha.
like I said, Jokic is having a historic season. I think that only, like I said, maybe only 10 or 11 seasons where there have been somebody with 0.3 or more win shares per 48 minutes. I think out of all those, only one season the player didn't win the MVP. I think that was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and that was because he had already won it twice in a row. And typically people don't like giving awards to people 3 times in a row because reasons. So I think that was sort of held against him. But in general, this number seems to jive well. And if you look at his box score numbers, you look at how he's carrying the Nuggets, everything about him screams MVP in a way that's higher than Damian Lillard as far as I'm concerned. And yet I think that people kind of sleep on Nikola Jokic just because I don't want to say it's because of the way he looks, because he looks like he's kind of just, some tubby 7-foot guy. But I think it's more because of the way he plays. And it's so unconventional for a center to be like the passing engine of the team, who's not really known for being a great rim protector, a great defender, but he's the offensive fulcrum of a playoff team and one of the best offenses in the league. And I think that's kind of a little bit different. Most people associate MVP level centers with being two-way type of players.
Gotcha. Okay. So no official prediction, just but Nikola Jokic would be your MVP pick if the season were to end right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's about all that we've got for basketball. So let's jump into some baseball discussion. Major League Baseball is they've issued a memo to the entire league, or both leagues, I should say, warning teams that they are cracking down on the use of foreign substances on baseballs. They're going to randomly pull balls that have been taken out of play, whether they've been hit out of play or taken out by the umpire, and test them to see if they've been tampered with using foreign substances like pine tar and things of that nature. They may also take some out and test them purposefully because they've exhibited a higher spin rate and things like that. They're actually going to be more closely observing spin rate in order to basically try and determine if teams are doing this. And the idea is to try and increase balls in play, increase the pace of the game. What do you two think about this? Let's start with Evan.
I mean, I'm fine with it. I think it's good that Major League Baseball decides to enforce some rules that they have. Going back to the Astros and sign stealing using electronics, for example. So, I mean, the pitcher having some sticky stuff on the ball would give him more control over where it's going. So, like, if a guy has a tendency to get a little wild and crazy, he might hit some people or just throw it to the backstop or something.
It can also increase
for him to have a good grip on it.
Yeah, it can also increase spin rate, which makes it easier or harder for batters to pick up the movement of the ball.
Right. Yeah. So that's the other thing is that it gives the pitcher an advantage to be able to make the ball break more. So you can't spit on the ball. You can't put pine tar or I think some pitcher one time had this shiny green stuff in his glove.
Yeah, I don't remember what that
was. John Lester.
Yeah, it was John Lester, but I don't remember what it was.
And I know Clay Buchholz would have like bullfrog sunscreen or something, like in a night game.
Michael Pineda had that stuff on his neck that one game.
Yeah, that was pine tar.
Yeah,
that was the whole bucket of pine tar, like all of it.
That was unbelievable.
Like, how did he not think we were going to notice that like one giant spot of his neck is just super shiny?
Well, especially with Pineda because he had been sort of caught the previous start because he had it on his wrist inside of his glove.
Yeah.
And the Red Sox noticed but didn't say anything. And then they went and got with Hugh Jackson and watched the tape. And they saw pretty clearly there was pine tar on his wrist. So this guy gets the brilliant idea of, well, this time I'm going to put it somewhere where they won't notice it, right on my neck. There's this big shiny glob on this dude's neck. It's like, they won't see it because, okay. And he got busted and he got yanked after like the first inning. And I was like, that's a little embarrassing. But it's funny to hear about this rule or this enforcement of these rules and potentially cracking down on some foreign substances, because just all the mudslinging that's gone on about who's actually doing that.
Pun.
Yeah, I guess you could use that as a pun. Sure, why not? But like Garrett Cole has been accused in the past of using foreign substances by Trevor Bauer, who has also been accused by others of using foreign substances. And a lot of times it's these big name pitchers. I mean, Garrett Cole is one of the best pitchers in the American League. Trevor Bauer's a Cy Young Award winner who's now going to the Dodgers. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this affects certain players that have been accused of certain inappropriate activities in the past.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of projection going on with the different accusations.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
sure. It's not to say that the people who are being accused aren't also doing it, but if you're accusing somebody, I would say that you should also have your stuff tested.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of it would surprise me at this point. I mean, but I agree with Evan. Can't have people having foreign substances on the balls. I think it's a good idea to try to make the game more offensively friendly. Give the hitters more of an opportunity to be able to put the ball in play. It's good for baseball when the ball's in play. It's been proven at this point that fan satisfaction with the game is higher when there are fewer strikeouts and more base hits or more sharp ground balls or whatever, some action happening versus just strikeouts, walks, and home runs.
Yeah, I mean, I like a good pitcher's duel where they're and I love watching a pitcher, mow people down to strikeout after strikeout. But it loses some of its flavor when strikeouts become as prevalent as they have become.
Yeah, when it's Joe Bag of Donuts,
right?
The fourth starter racking up 10 Ks a night. I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Fernando Tatis, one of the most exciting players in baseball. He signed that 14-year contract for $340 million this past offseason. He's had a bit of a rough month. He missed a few games with flu-like symptoms. And then about a week and a half ago, he was diving into home on a shallow fly ball and kind of jarred himself a little bit on the slide. And then yesterday, he left the Padres spring training game against the Reds with some left shoulder discomfort, and they're supposed to have reevaluated him today. I haven't seen anything since then. I don't know if either of you have, but hopefully it's nothing too serious. But it's been a bit of a rough month for him.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I haven't really been paying too much attention to the Cactus League, but he's the cover athlete on MLB The Show this year.
Yep.
He signed that huge deal. He's a fun, exciting player to watch. So it would really suck if this is his really breakout season for superstardom and it's plagued with injuries.
Yeah, Eric, have you seen anything about it or no?
Not really. Yeah, it's obviously not great when any star player is getting hurt. Hopefully it's not anything serious, but it's a long season. And so the most important thing is just to get right and get healthy. And if you need some time, you have to miss a couple weeks in April or whatever, you got to do what you got to do. I saw a lot of people freaking out about, oh my God, he's just signed a 14-year deal and now he's getting hurt. Well, he was going to get hurt at some point over the course of a 14-year tenure. So getting worried about a shortstop getting banged up a little bit seems a little bit inappropriate. We're not talking about a guy that is just going to be infirmed the entire time. I think it's just with the way that the Padres had hoped to get into this season and compete for the NL West with the Dodgers, you'd obviously like to have him on the field as much as possible and at 100%.
And obviously, you can't expect a guy to be Cal Ripken, right? He's not going to play all the games every year for 14 years. That's superhuman. Nobody does that. at any position.
Yeah, certainly not
shortstop.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we get into to our teams real quick. Just a short rundown of what's new with the Yankees and the Orioles. The Yankees are 1-4-1 since the last podcast. I'm honestly not sure how we have a winning record and a fairly a very winning record this spring training, because
a very winning record.
I don't know. Every time that I give an update on the record from the past week, like, we've barely won a game. It's just awful. So somehow we're actually doing pretty well this spring training. But we had a 5-0 loss to Toronto today. David Garcia certainly did not help his case for getting the 5th rotation spot. He saw his ERA jump up from 1 point something to over 3 just today. He's 0-2 in decisions on 5 starts this spring training. He's been battling with Domingo Germán for the 5th rotation spot behind Cole, Kluber, Taillon, and Montgomery. Not really a whole lot else to talk about with the Yankees. They've announced a 20% capacity for home games at the start of the season. They've announced that for the second year in a row, they're going to stream 21 of their home games on Amazon Prime, but only within New York's market, which, I mean, if you're in New York's market, you get the Yes Network, so I don't know why it needs to be on Amazon Prime, but...
Well, you have to pay for... You have to buy cable, right? Some people don't buy cable.
I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much it with the Yankees. I don't really have a whole lot else to report there. The big thing right now is just trying to figure out who's going to get that 5th rotation spot, because we're only about a week away from opening day. So what's new with the Orioles?
Well, we found out Chris Davis might have to go on the injured list. So insert your Jerry Seinfeld, "Oh, that's a shame," while eating popcorn.
Oh, no. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. Orioles are playing the Red Sox down in Fort Myers tonight. Dean Kramer's starting. I haven't gotten any ESPN alerts about score changes or anything like that. So we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Yesterday, the Orioles finally felt it was worth their while, and they had some time to broadcast a game.
Whoa!
For
People
the first
actually got
time.
to see them playing?
Yeah. Well, it was a day game, so no, I didn't get to see them play. Yeah. It was a 4-3 win over Tampa Bay. Trey Mancini hit a 2-run home run to the opposite field. So that was good to see.
Nice. And then you guys are planning to open a new facility down in the Dominican Republic that, the artwork for it looks gorgeous.
Stunning. Oh, this was the best news of the day, at least Orioles-wise. So they're going to open a brand new training facility. Seems like more of a training academy like European soccer clubs have, where they just, they have these local kids, and this is where they go to school, and this is where they learn to play, in this case, baseball. So the complex will house the club's Dominican player development operations, 3 full fields, a turfed agility field, batting and pitching tunnels, and more. It'll also feature 3 classrooms, a computer lab, and a dining room.
Oh, nice.
It also has dorms, so you just live there.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine you could probably hold summer camps and things like that there. Do other teams have facilities like this already in the Dominican Republic?
It seems likely, yeah. I was reading a little bit this afternoon. The Orioles had been using the Indians' old facility or something. Apparently, they just got a new one.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I mean, if this isn't something that a lot of other teams have done, why not? Not only is it good for the sport of baseball to teach more kids about it, get more interest. But it's also just from a humanitarian standpoint, this is really cool for the people down there to be able to take advantage of these resources and these facilities.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So they're supposed to break ground sometime this summer, and it's going to take about a year or so to build it.
Okay. Yeah, it's always good to get more interest down there, especially because we know that the Dominican Republic is a hotbed for Major League Baseball talent.
Yes, it is.
And we also know, Evan and I know all too well, that the Baltimore Orioles haven't had a whole lot of success acquiring international talent. And the DR is the best place to go if you're looking for that. And so being able to get some type of public interest and some goodwill with the organization down there is really important for a franchise that's trying to turn around their image as a franchise when it comes to international players. It's been something that Peter Angelos and Dan Duquette were absolutely, afraid to do or uninterested in doing for whatever reason. They simply did not want to put in the legwork to acquire international players. And Mike Elias seems to be taking this team into a different direction, which is obviously going to be important for the franchise's success. So this is really important to me.
And it was comical, the level that the Orioles, refused to do any sort of international stuff. Like there'd be a player in the Dominican Republic or somewhere, in Latin America, and like there'd be scouts from 29 teams at their showcase or whatever. And who's the one team that's not here? Oh, it's the Orioles again. Certainly. It was always the Orioles who were just uninterested in getting good players. I don't know how you're supposed to have any success if you're just not interested in, searching high and low for talent. That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like what 30% or so of Major League Baseball's talent is, comes from Latin America. I mean, so that's a pretty big chunk of the talent pool that you're just ignoring. You're never going to be able to keep up with that type of attitude.
Like, imagine if an NFL team decided, like, we're not going to draft any guys who, didn't play FBS level, right? Like, we only draft, people from the Power 5 conferences. Like, yeah, you're going to have some good players, but your roster's just going to have holes because you didn't search everywhere you needed to get the best guys, right? Like, didn't Jerry Rice go to Mississippi Valley State or something? Like, you would just, he didn't go to big school ABC, so he's obviously not any good. You just missed out.
Yeah, Brett Favre didn't go to a big school either, so I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know how big Indiana State is, but I can't imagine it was ever that big. But Larry Bird went there.
Well,
the Sycamores.
Larry Bird also led his team to the NCAA tournament finals.
Yeah,
so there's plenty of national attention on the hick from French Lick. He was Mr. Indiana basketball. So.
Sure.
I mean, but the point still stands. You can still be great at a school like that, or you could be great anywhere in the world. You just have to have people willing to find you. And like Evan said, 29 out of 30 franchises seem to be willing to scour the earth for Major League Baseball talent. There was one exception to that rule, and that one exception seems to have come around and is heading in the right direction, being able to actually compete, because this is important. To be able to compete for talent is how you compete for wins on the field.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Jumping into just a little bit of hockey news. If you've been paying attention to Twitter, Tim Peel is a referee who was supposed to be retiring at the end of the season anyway, but he is effective immediately not going to work any more NHL games in the future because he was caught on a hot mic last night, basically admitting to trying to call a penalty against the Nashville Predators, looking for an excuse to call a penalty on them. He said it wasn't much. So he called a penalty, but I guess the Nashville broadcast caught some audio of him saying it wasn't much, but I wanted to get an effing penalty against Nashville early. So basically admitting to looking for a reason to call something on them. So he's no longer going to be calling games, but, as with any kind of, revelation like this, it makes you wonder, how many other times has a referee or an umpire or any official in any sport, purposefully looked to call a penalty on somebody, and how often does it go unnoticed because we don't catch hot mic moments like this?
I mean, if you really put on your crazy fan glasses, right? Like every single time a penalty's called against your team, oh well, they're just looking for a penalty. That's a bunch of crap.
Of course, you could
crap?
also argue that it would be equally, tinfoil hat-ish to assume that no referee ever up until this point has thought that way.
Well, this instance, for some more context, this was done in response to what was seen as a missed call that should have been called on a Nashville Predator. So this is sort of a makeup call situation where we all know refs do this crap all the time. They miss a call that goes in one team's favor, and suddenly another bad call happens that goes against them, and we all say, oh, there's a makeup call. But they never actually say that quiet part out loud. And this time, this dude accidentally said the quiet part out loud in front of a local broadcast. So naturally, the NHL can't have this. It's like when that idiot for the Mariners was basically saying that bragging about manipulating service time. Like, we know you do it. We're well aware that teams do this. You can't actually admit to it. And this is a case where a guy accidentally admitted to doing something that we've believed refs do all the time in all sports, and particularly in hockey. Hockey is definitely a sport where that makeup call seems to come a lot. And this kind of helps add to the idea. It's like you, as a fan, you kind of sometimes tell yourself you're just perceiving that. That's in your head. Like, you think that's what happened because it seems like something that would happen. This kind of adds to, it's like, no, this actually does happen.
Well, yeah, because
think like this.
I mean, you might have understood like why people might think, that's just a perception. Like, there's no way that's actually the case, because what's the purpose of why would there be makeup calls? I mean, the whole idea behind it is like you missed something, but if you missed it, inherently you don't know that you missed it. So why would you then call a penalty because of something you missed? Why didn't you just call the initial penalty? Unless you're just bowing to the booing from the fans.
Maybe it's too late to change stuff, right? Like, some of these types of rules, you can't just retroactively go back and fix it, even if it's blatantly obvious it was a bad call.
Right, but the whole thing is like you didn't notice at the time, so how are you now, like, how would you come to notice it after the fact in order to call a makeup call?
I mean, certainly the fans noticed, right?
Right, but fans are gonna make noise anyway. I mean, there were so many times with when we go to Maryland basketball games, Eric, you and me, and the whole stadium would be calling travel on the other player, and I'm looking at you and we're like, that wasn't really a travel, but that was a travel. Like, we're still gonna yell at the refs because we want the call. Doesn't mean the call happened.
Yeah, hive mind situation kicks in there, but there are cases though where, and I don't know the complete story here, but there are instances where the ref maybe thinks about calling a penalty and then they don't, and then it's too late and they move on. Maybe they did see a replay for whatever reason at some point. Maybe it happened because he mentioned I wanted to get him early in the period. Maybe they saw something on replay during the intermission and they realized, oh crap, true. I missed that call. So there are ways that they could potentially see that it was a penalty and either just fail to call it because in the moment they thought, nah, or they just didn't notice, but somehow somebody informed them later that they missed a call. And that seems to be the case here. But it is interesting to think about how much of that psychology does come in where a ref misses a call, has no idea that he missed a call, and then some outside influence convinces him that he missed a call, and then he decides to do a makeup call, even though he might not have actually missed a call at all. Like there is, but that is the part of the home field advantage where if everybody in the crowd is booing the hell out of you because they perceive that you screwed them out of a call, you're likely to say, oh, gee, I might have actually messed that one up. Like, you cave to the crowd. I mean, we've seen this happen regularly. That's a big part of it. It's why home cooking is a thing. So, but again, you can't say it out loud. You can't admit to, even though that is a moment where the ref is trying to be, quote unquote, impartial by evening the slate, but you're still supposed to be impartial the entire time by just calling it how you see it. And at that point, you were looking to call something against this team specifically. Therefore, you are no longer doing your job.
I mean, you took one bad call and turned it into 2 bad calls now. So now you have to make up for the makeup call, and on and on.
Yeah, it's a constant back and forth. Sometimes we just need to accept that the refs miss calls, and it sucks. It's no fun when your team gets hosed because of a bad call or a bad no call. But this idea that we can continue to escalate it by saying, well, you owe us one, so call that on them. And say, well, that one wasn't as bad as that one, so you need to call another one on that. It's just like, it's nonsense. Just call the game straight up. And sure, sometimes one team's going to benefit from the whistle versus the other, but that's just where we are as sports fans. And until you get automated officials and, some type of way to rule this in a way that's not prone to human error, this is going to be the way sports
robotic
work.
strike zone.
Yeah, but I don't see how that's ever going to work in hockey, because hockey, every penalty pretty much is discretionary with the exception of like a delayed game or too many men on the ice. Like those penalties are cut and dry. But what's a charging penalty? What's interference? What kind of cross check will they let you get away with? Because players get cross checked all the time. And sometimes they're just like, not enough to call it. And it's like, okay, whatever. That's just the way it goes.
I mean, I think the bottom line is just get the calls right. Whatever technology exists, or replay, or officials with super duper vision or whatever, just get the calls right. That's all I care about. If it's obvious to me that the officials screwed up, but they can't fix it, then that's a problem. But just get the calls right.
Yeah, period. No more referees with just supervision. We need the super duper vision.
Yes, absolutely.
Their vision needs to be tippy top.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's jump to the NFL, and then we'll come back to NCAA basketball. We'll close with the big story going on right now, but let's jump over to the NFL. Last week, we mentioned the lawsuits that are coming out against Texans quarterback Deshaun Watson. Didn't have a lot to talk about there. We've gotten a lot more information. I don't know how much we necessarily want to discuss our thoughts on all this right now. I mean, I'm certainly interested to get your guys' thoughts if you have any you're ready to share, but we are still gathering information. As of today, the number of lawsuits has reached, I believe, 16. And there are more than 20. There's like 24 or so total women who have come out to accuse Deshaun Watson of sexual misconduct. Most of them various massage therapists claiming that he exposed himself, performed sex acts in front of them, or forced them to perform sex acts on him. One of them called him a serial predator. But the first bit of a rebuttal that we got coming from Deshaun Watson's camp, outside of one tweet that Deshaun Watson himself put out last week, before we started to actually get all these lawsuits piling up, his lawyer came out yesterday and said that the law firm has strong evidence showing that one of the lawsuits is false, and suggested that false lawsuit calls into question the legitimacy of the others in the case. He said that any allegation that Deshaun Watson forced a woman to commit a sexual act on him is completely false. He's also, though, said that the lawyer for all of these women who have come out to accuse Deshaun Watson has refused to confidentially provide the names of the plaintiffs to allow them to fully investigate the claims, which, on one hand, could potentially call into question the legitimacy of those lawsuits, but at the same time, it also calls a little bit into question the claim that they've found strong evidence that one of them is false. How can you say that when you don't know the identity of most of the women in these lawsuits? They're calling these Jane Doe lawsuits, which would suggest they don't know who the women are who are making these accusations. So it feels like a lot of he said, she said here, but anytime you're dealing with more than 20 women coming out and making these accusations, you have to take them seriously. Like you cannot brush those aside. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on this, but the main thing here is just, letting our listeners know, like, this is kind of what's going on. And, we certainly are not ignoring this issue, because this is a very serious issue.
Yeah, this is certainly very serious. And, you said 20 women?
I think it's 24.
Right? Like, this isn't 24.
I believe it's 24.
Oh, like, this isn't just, like, one woman, like, you can't claim, like, oh, well, this is just one woman making something up to try to get some money or something like that. When it's this many people, it's obvious that there's a pattern of some sort of misbehavior. Like, I'm not going to have 24 people making something up.
Yeah, I mean, if he didn't actually go as far as these women are saying, he has to have still done something to piss them off at the very least. Like,
yeah.
what 24 women are going to come out and make something up like this, on a whim?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. That.
I mean, I guess there is the conspiracy theory that this is all staged by the Texans organization, but that just once you start to deal with 24 women, like, you would expect there to be some evidence already coming out by now that would refute that. So I have to believe that conspiracy theory is exactly what it is. It's a conspiracy. It's not.
That sounds like
it's not legit.
Crap. That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, why would they trash their own player like this?
Yeah,
he hates them.
Well, I think the idea behind that belief is that it's coming out of Deshaun wanting to leave and refusing to play for them anymore, and so, like, they're angry at him or something. I don't know.
Them in any way,
it still doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I'm still keeping an open mind at this point, because there's so much on both sides that seems like I can't trust either party, because I talked about this a little bit. Just the nature of the volume of the accusations is one thing. Having 24 women accuse you of sexual misconduct is absolutely going to make me think you did something. And, and not to be that guy that kind of steps on your toes a little bit here, Corey, but anytime any person, one woman is enough to take it seriously. Like, there's, like, just to be clear, and I know you mean that, but so even if it's just one, like, my feeling on, like, when it comes to the Me Too movement and things like that is, a lot of people misconstrue it as, if a woman accuses a man of sexual misconduct, you have to believe her point blank. No, you have to take it seriously, though. You have to give it credibility and then you do the fact finding and determine, whether there's enough to prove guilt or not, or whether there's enough to draw any conclusions. But you absolutely don't disregard any accusation. You have to take it all seriously. And so here we've got 24 women, which, again, it's hard to believe that they're all just making something up. But at the same time, the lawyer that represents all of them has a bad history. He's had a history of being sketchy before. There seems to be some connection with the McNair family, which, again, I don't know how that really ties in. There doesn't seem to be any real benefit to anybody with the Texans organization to smear Deshaun Watson, because if he's your quarterback, you don't want to make him look terrible. And if you're trying to trade him, you don't want to make him look terrible so that he's less of a trade asset. So I just don't think that there's any reason to believe that the Texans are somehow in on this. But there still is a history of problematic behavior with this attorney. At the same time, I got to question Deshaun Watson's judgment at the very least. Like, what are you doing hitting these women up off of Instagram? What is the nature of these encounters? How did this happen? Like, that's something that he needs to answer, and he needs to answer that himself, not through a lawyer. He needs to make a public statement and get in front of this and make us believe him, because right now, if he stays silent for much longer, he's going to lose all benefit of the doubt that he has based off of any type of goodwill he's earned. Because, again, 24 women, all in the same line of work, it seems, accusing you of the same thing, seems to suggest that you've got a thing for doing this. So you need to explain yourself.
Yeah, we certainly have to hear from him.
Yeah.
If somebody's out to slander your reputation, if you did nothing wrong, you need to be really bold and like, hey, this is baloney here, right? Like she's making it up, but that hasn't happened. We haven't heard from him. So and obviously the volume of cases like this isn't an isolated issue. This is a pattern here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's even more alarming to me though is the fact that it's one thing for a young man to hit up somebody on Instagram looking for a massage and secretly be wanting to hook up with the masseuse as well. That's something that somebody would do. But you would think after trying that once or twice, and by the way, the woman that's coming to you is doing so as a business transaction. She's coming to provide a service to you as a masseuse. So assuming that she's going to be down to doing whatever you want sexually is moronic. But you would think after one misunderstanding, if that's all this was, that you wouldn't try again. And the fact that this seems to be a continuous thing that Watson did, and again, he needs to answer for whether or not that's true himself, then I don't see any way that Watson comes out of this clean. I just don't.
Yeah. Moving to some stuff that has more to do with the product on the field. Evan, your Ravens still have not found a wide receiver for for Lamar Jackson. They apparently were trying to get Sammy Watkins. I don't know how enthused you would have felt about that, but that hasn't happened.
That would earn a thumbs down for me. Sammy Watkins, he's a good, piece to have, right? If you have a bunch of other stud receivers, you throw in a Sammy Watkins like the Chiefs did. But I feel like Sammy Watkins isn't the type of guy you can count on, right? It's 3rd and 10 at Gillette Stadium in December. Do we want to count on Sammy Watkins?
Probably not.
Is he going to have a hammy since October and he's been out?
And this has been a year after year issue for the Ravens, is not getting wide receivers.
26th year of this problem. It's been decades.
So what needs to happen?
I don't even know, right? They need to draft somebody who doesn't suck. That's really where they should start. Because the free agency thing, you have to convince a guy to come to Baltimore, and that's been kind of hard since the Ravens don't really throw the ball that much. So, you have to find somebody who's good and who would be willing to block and maybe not catch as many passes. So I was hoping for a Corey Davis. He would have been a good fit, but the Jets offered more money. So, that's fine. Go to the Jets, I guess. Well, that's NFL Siberia for you. You've just fallen off the edge of the earth going to the Jets.
Well, they needed somebody to make up for the loss of Robbie Anderson.
Oh, okay. Well, the guy who needs to step up is Marquise Brown, right? He's supposed to be the guy. He's one of many people in a long list of people who's supposed to be the guy and isn't the guy. So that's the problem right there. Got to be reliable. You have to catch the ball, Marquise Brown. Catch the ball.
They started doing that a little bit toward the end of the year.
And stuff.
A little bit.
Maybe you should catch the ball a little bit. But Ravens fans getting upset on Twitter, I understand, but I'm honestly not that worked up over it because it's, like I said, it's been 26 years of the same stuff. We can't get a number one receiver for Joe Flacco, remember? It's maybe we'll draft somebody else. Maybe he'll be a large person. Maybe he'll catch the ball on 3rd down in Cleveland on Monday Night Football, for example.
Speaking of Joe Flacco, he signed a deal with the Eagles to back up Jalen Hurts.
I'm so happy for Joe Flacco. I will always root for Joe Flacco. I guess unless he, signs with the Steelers or something. But, Joe's from South Jersey, so, it's kind of a homecoming for him.
Yeah. Eric, our Washington football team, a little bit of news with them. First, they are doing some sort of a documentary called Making the Brand, playing off of Titty's Making the Band from back in the day.
Yeah, MTV style. Jeez.
Yeah. So basically, it's their process of figuring out what they're going to do with the team name. Apparently, the organization is leaning more and more toward just leaving it as the Washington football team. They're reporting they've gotten a lot of positive feedback from fans on that front. And, I've seen some of that positive feedback. I certainly have seen some real, serious Washington fans become more and more accepting of the name. But I've also seen that the lack of a quote unquote real name is continuing to embolden certain individuals to continue using the old R word name in their social media posts, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or Reddit.
You interact with these ignorant people?
I don't really interact with them, but I see their posts on these blurbs. So I certainly feel like the lack of a name has kind of emboldened some of the people to continue to use that and continue to say our words forever and HTTR, things like that, which it is what it is, but the team is going to have to accept like that's going to be a reality. And it may be a reality either way, but I feel like that would become a little bit less prominent if we actually rebranded with a new name, whether it's the Red Wolves or any other number of possible names that we could
Wildcats, right?
I don't know. The Wildcats are in the running, but Warriors I know, and Red Tails is another possibility. And they are very much committed to keeping the burgundy and gold color scheme, which I like, but it does potentially keep that old name in the conversation if we don't rebrand into something other than just football team.
They need a name. They need a name. There's no doubt about that, because everything you just said, Corey, is 100% accurate. Imagine if you're a kid and you look around the NFL and you see 31 out of 32 teams have a real name, and then there's this one team that's just called the football team. And you ask Dad, why is that team called the football team?
I don't like that argument because that sounds a little too much like, how do I explain gay marriage to my kid?
It doesn't matter, though.
You have a serious conversation.
Exactly.
You have to explain what happened.
Exactly. You explain we had a racist name and now we don't.
87 years.
Okay, but you had a racist name and now you have no name. You look like an idiot. You haven't moved on, though. You haven't actually moved past anything. You just took the one name off and left it blank. So if you sit there and you say, we should change our name, then you take this one down and you put a new one up. You don't just leave it blank.
Yes, I agree with that part. I agree with the, by going with football team, and I've said before on the show, I've warmed up to just Washington football team. I like it. That doesn't mean that I think that we should keep it. And it's for that exact reason that you just said, Eric. We haven't exactly moved on, right? Like, some of us have moved on. Some of us really have. And so, if I have a kid and he's wondering, Daddy, why are we the only team that doesn't have a nickname? Like, I can explain that fairly easily to my kid. I feel like, but we haven't really moved on in a way that is going to allow certain individuals in our society to move on. So I agree with that.
My issue again is not the fact that you have to have a conversation with your child about how they used to have a racist name. My issue is it draws attention to it. It draws additional attention to something that if you change the name, it could easily be moved off of. How many people associate the St. John's Red Storm with racism anymore? Virtually nobody.
That's true.
But if they were just the St. John's college basketball team, people are like, why don't they have a mascot? Oh, right, because they used to be called this. And people would just say, let's just call them that. Or people will be emboldened, like you said, to continue to call them that. Hell, it even causes us who have committed to not saying that to sometimes slip up, because saying Washington football team sounds ridiculous. if you actually have a mascot to say, then there's something to replace the racist nickname instead of just leaving a void, which, like you said, is going to incline people to just say, forget it. We don't even have a name. We're just going to call us the same old name as before.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, the biggest frustration, as a sports person is, when I'm talking about the Eagles against, I'll start to say the Eagles against and I'll catch myself and be like, Washington. Who's the Washington?
The Washington football team.
The team.
Yeah, the team. They're the team, right? Like, I guess you have to emphasize that. I don't particularly care. I'm not a fan of the team.
No, but I think Eric brings a good point in bring St. John's as an example, or was it Ohio, or was it a school in Ohio? I forget if it was actually
Ohio.
Ohio.
Thinking Ball State, maybe.
It wasn't Ball State.
Miami, Ohio. They used to be the.
Was it Miami, Ohio? That was that same.
They're the Red Hawks now.
Right. Whichever one is now the Red Hawks. Like, they had that name before as well, and you don't really think about that much. Except when you're having the conversation about that word and the teams that have moved off of it, you don't associate those schools with that word anymore. I think that Eric makes a really good point that football team doesn't really it doesn't fulfill that purpose of really allowing us to move off of that name. And to be fair, we're also in a situation where not a lot of time has passed yet. And so maybe over time we would kind of forget about that at some point. But it does seem like just having it be the football team will, at the very least, extend the period of time that it will take for us to fully move on and forget about that.
Well, one thing that's interesting here is that the football team, like, there's been an industry that's sprung up of people trademarking names that the football team could change their name to in an attempt to get the football team to buy that name from them. So, there's now less possible names to choose from, because they took so long to decide to change it, that they have limited sensible options. And that's nobody's fault but their own. I don't feel bad, but I feel like that's a factor in this delay of sticking with football team.
Yeah, it would be different to me if the decision that came down from on high, that is Dan Snyder's decision, to change the name was, we're just going to call ourselves the football team. Like, that's just a thing we're going to do. That's the green badge decision. Just send it in. That's what it is. That's the decision we've made. No, this is just we need to call us something in the meantime while we come up with the real name. If you just let that sit there, it looks half-assed. Like, it looks like a half-assed gesture that was done as a knee-jerk in response to what happened this summer all around the country with George Floyd and the reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement and all the protests that we saw. And they felt like we had to do something, but we didn't actually have our heart in it. No, you need to commit to this and get this done so you can actually move forward.
Yeah. Some other news involving Washington's football team. Dan Snyder has his application for a $450 million debt waiver has been approved by the NFL's Finance Committee, which will allow him to move forward in buying out the team's minority owners of their roughly 40.5% share of the team, which will make him, I guess, the full, or just about the full owner. I don't know that he's, because I think that a couple other people in his family own small shares, but he would own more than 80% of the team at that point. There's an upcoming meeting of NFL owners where he would need, I believe, 24 votes in favor of the transaction, his included. But it seems a little bit odd to me. I mean, I guess it's not done yet, and ultimately it comes down to the other owners. But it feels weird that the Finance Committee would approve this, considering he's probably the least popular owner among the other 31 owners in the NFL.
Oh, I can't speak to that. I don't get the sense that any of the other owners like him. Like,
Well, right.
you know,
That's what I'm
you
saying.
could
Like,
kinda-
I'm not just talking about like least popular among his fan base, because while I would argue he's certainly among the least popular in that respect, I don't know how every fan base feels about their owner. But among the other owners in the NFL, he doesn't really seem to belong to any of the cliques, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and he's not like one of the powerful owners too. He's not a Robert Kraft or Jerry Jones, where
No, not at
you know,
all.
if you change this guy's mind, that that's who changes everybody else's mind at the table as well. Like that's, you know, he doesn't seem like he has that level of influence. And I don't know where he ranks in terms of, you know, just having cash on hand compared to the other owners either. But why? My question is, why is he doing this? Right?
Because
Like,
these
what-
other minority owners have been trying to sell their shares for months, and there's been a lot of
But they don't have to sell
headbutting
them
and-
to him. They can sell them to anybody.
Well, yeah, but nobody else wants to buy it. Nobody wants to go into business with Dan Snyder.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I think that could be a bigger factor here, is that um, the brand that is the Washington football team has become toxic because of Dan Snyder primarily. And I don't think that anybody that follows the team for the last 20 years, 20 plus years, would be surprised by that statement. Dan Snyder is absolutely a negative for the NFL and for this franchise. But I think also the fact that the heat has been turned up even higher because of the stories that we saw last summer and the additional investigations that are ongoing regarding the behavior of the front office and of Dan Snyder himself with regards to sexual harassment and misconduct. And I think that you definitely see these minority owners wanting to get out from under that brand. And I also see potential that the NFL could look at this and say, it's a lot easier, and maybe this is me hoping against hope, but it's a lot easier to handle an ousting potentially if there's one stable owner instead of an ownership group that has various different chunks of things going on. Because I just can't see the NFL saying, we want to give Dan Snyder more power after he's embarrassed everybody. I think this is more about, all right, well, you've made your bed. You're going to be the one that lays in it no matter how this goes. So, again, I don't expect Dan Snyder to be forced to sell the team or anything like that, just because that's too good to be true. But I think that there is something to be said about both the minority owners and the NFL saying, all right, well, you've made a craptacular mess of this historically great franchise. Yeah, it's on you now. And you're going to have to be the one that faces the full brunt of the consequences for your own behavior and for your own mishandling of this team that is a privilege to own. It's not a right.
I mean, it would take the other owners to vote him off the island, though, right? Like, how did the other owners feel about him? You know, they you know, there was a certain guy from New York City who had a reality TV show who wanted to buy the Bills, and you know, the owners thought he was a clown, so he decided to run for president instead. So, you know,
Yeah, Pete Rozelle put a big fat no on that bid for the Bills. You know, I want to say thankfully he did, but we know how things turned out down the road. So, you know, maybe ruining the Bills would have been a worthwhile sacrifice to avoid what we all went through.
Ruining the entire world.
Yes. But I, again, hoping against hope that this works out in a way that, you know, forces some sort of change, whether it's an ownership change or just anything to make the situation better with regards to Dan Snyder's behavior, because it has been nothing short of deplorable for the last 2 decades.
I mean, like Tony Kornheiser says, the answer to all your questions is money. So, like, when the NFL starts losing money because of Dan Snyder's behavior, like the NFL as a whole, the whole brand starts losing money because of Dan Snyder, then that's when they'll get rid of him. You know, so I don't think until something comes out or until he does something or until, you know, stuff gets worse somehow, I don't think he's going anywhere.
So let's move into some NCAA basketball discussion. This will be our last topic of the night, but we got a lot to talk about here because we had a busy first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. But before the tournament even began, we started seeing some things on social media regarding the different conditions that the men and women were facing in their respective tournaments, where the men were treated to these breakfast buffets and lots of food and these big weight room areas, swag bags and things like that, where the women were getting like a boxed lunch, which, I mean, is fine, but it's not a buffet. Their weight room was basically a few dumbbells in a corner, despite having plenty of room. Like, the NCAA tried to come out and say we had a room issue, we didn't have enough space, and one of the players did a video. Is like, yeah, no, we have all of this unused space
The
right
whole
here.
hotel ballroom, and it's just the
So that was BS. You know, they weren't getting the swag bags that the men were getting. So, you know, the NCAA ultimately, you know, kind of fixed the weight room situation. I haven't seen any updates on the food situation of swag bags, so I don't know if they've addressed those issues at all. But, you know, it's this, you know, I mean, it's great that they've gone ahead and done this. They should have done that from the beginning. You know, like, who was it? Was it Swaggy P who was on Instagram saying, like, y'all the JV team, sit down, basically? Like, I know that's kind of paraphrasing what he said, but it's basically saying, like, why are you guys complaining, or why are you girls complaining? Y'all are the JV team. Of course you're not going to get the same treatment that the men get. Which, like,
this is
again, kind of saying the quiet part out loud. We've always kind of figured that's probably the case, but now, like, we're actually seeing it. Like, don't downplay that. Like, this is serious. This is supposed to be a non-profit corporation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
I mean, you've never been able to count on the NCAA to lead the world in terms of ethics.
no,
right?
not at all.
You know, that, like, this is their brand. This type of stuff is what they do. It's been a century and a half at this point. You know, this isn't a surprise. But I mean, I think this was obviously intentional, and you know, it's disgusting, frankly, that they just didn't care to even try to make it even initially. Like, it blew up online. That's why they changed. You know, if there was no Twitter or Instagram or anything, you know, nobody would have found out, maybe. Like,
Yeah.
So, I mean, this was done intentionally, and this I think is the issue with college sports being, you know, amateur sports still, even though it makes so much money. Like, if you're going to have, you know, big time college football and men's basketball making a whole bunch of money, like, this is the type of stuff you have to pay for with that money. You know, so you have to treat the men's teams and the women's teams equally. And yes, that's expensive, but you can't tell me you can't afford it.
Right.
Right.
I mean, if you really, if it's a money issue, then just, you know, give the men boxed lunches instead of buffets.
Right. Yeah.
Like
I mean, you know, especially in basketball, when the men and the women play the same sport, they're doing the same thing. Like, I mean, there's no women's football to compare and contrast to, but, like, when it's so obvious, like, you know, the men are getting this and the women are getting this for no reason other than the women are getting this because we said so, then that's where I draw the line. Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's no excuse for this. This was 100% done deliberately. There's no way you could say this is an oversight. There's no way you can say that, oh, we didn't realize. They did, and they knew that this would become an issue. Like, every single person knew, because, like you said, Evan, yeah, if there were no Instagram or Twitter, we might not have found out about this. But since there are Instagram and there is Twitter, you knew that we would find out about
Yeah.
this. The instant a female athlete walked into that situation and snapped a pic and posted on the gram, you knew that was going to go viral, and that it was going to hit the fan at that point, and that you were going to have to make this right. And there is no excuse about, oh, y'all don't make as much money as we do. Well, they still make some money. Guess what? ESPN pays $500 million to broadcast the women's tournament. It's not exactly a money pit. It is something that they rely on for revenue as well. So these ladies go out there and they add to the revenue stream. Not that that should matter anyway. This is an issue of, we didn't want to treat you right because you're women and we think you're less than the men. Purely and simply, this is 100% militant sexism. Nothing more, nothing less. Every single person that had any involvement in this decision should be fired immediately. This is embarrassing.
Yep. No, I don't have anything to add to that. I agree 100%.
There's no excuse for this.
No.
Right? Like, what if you made this decision, what can you say to try to defend yourself? Nothing. Right? Like, you can't even say, oh, well, we screwed up. No, you didn't screw up. You made this decision on purpose. Right? We're like, oh, well, we're going to have the men. They're going to have the giant buffet, and it's going to be lavish and extravagant. And the women, y'all can have graham crackers and, I guess, peanut butter and apples or something.
Yeah.
It's been sitting out all day.
But no cream cheese.
Yeah, no cream cheese though. That's against the rules. I mean, this is absurd, and like, just make it right. Just do the basic stuff to do the right thing. That's all you have to do. And like, this isn't these are the times we live in now. This was the right thing to do decades and centuries ago, and the fact that they still chose to not treat the men and women equally is just utterly ridiculous.
Yeah. So, admittedly, I have not paid super close attention to the women's tournament, though I have watched both Maryland games, and they crushed Mount St. Mary's on Monday, 98-45, and they ran it back.
Wow.
And then they ran it back and crushed Alabama today, 100-64.
Oh, wow. Like when Georgia Tech football beat Cumberland College 222-0, that was a revenge game from some baseball game some time before that. So, like, was this a revenge game against Alabama?
In a sense, yeah. In a sense, I mean, Maryland went off from 3 points just like Alabama did against the men yesterday. Monday. I will say just a couple interesting quarters here. So in the second quarter of today's game, in the first quarter today, Maryland outscored Alabama 30-9. In the second quarter of Monday's game against Mount St. Mary's, we outscored them 25-4.
25-4.
Yikes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a CYO score when St. Hugh's would play St. Jerome's and we'd score 6 points all game. And they'd score like 48.
Yeah, so a couple of really good games for Maryland on the women's side. This is their first trip to the Sweet 16 since 2017, so good for them. Hopefully they continue to have success there. Not sure yet who they'll be playing, and they'll either be playing Saturday or Sunday, their next game, I believe, but I'm not sure who they'll be playing yet. Looking at the
Tech women's teams in the Sweet 16 as well.
Oh, wow, nice.
I don't remember who we played, but they're moving on. Unlike the men's team, who we'll get to in a second.
Yes, in fact, we'll get to them right now because let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the men's tournament. Starting with your Yellow Jackets, Evan, they lost to Loyola University of Chicago on Friday afternoon. It was a 71-60 defeat, and it was their first NCAA tournament appearance, as we mentioned last week, since 2010.
Yes. Yeah, so, I mean, I didn't really expect us to win. I picked us to win, because, I mean, it's been 11 years since I could even write Georgia Tech on the line. Right? It might be 11 more years when I'm 41, when we go back to the tournament.
Oh my God, I don't even want to think about how old I'll be in 11 years.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a little while. So, I mean, we were without our best player and ACC Player of the Year, Moses Wright, due to COVID issues. So as a result, we didn't have any bigs down low at all. Loyola Chicago, they just had their way in the paint, basically, which was unfortunate. And probably Loyola was a little bit underseeded as well. I don't even know what conference they're in. Are they in the Missouri Valley or something like that?
Good question. I'll take a look real quick while you continue to talk.
Yeah, so they were probably underseeded, and they were an actual good team.
They are. So, you're absolutely right. Missouri Valley Conference.
Okay. Yeah. So it was a good year for Tech. I'm glad we made the tournament. I don't want to run our coach out of town for just making the tournament. I don't know anybody who thinks they should run their team's coach out of town because he only made the tournament. So I did a little quick research this afternoon. So the last Georgia Tech game was March 21st, 2010. The last game. NCAA tournament game. Yeah. So on that date, Alice in Wonderland starring Johnny Depp was the #1 movie in America. Apparently, I don't know. I don't see a lot of movies in general.
I have not seen that one. I knew that he was in it. I have not seen it.
Yeah. Break Your Heart by Tayo Cruz featuring Ludacris was the #1 song.
I'm only gonna break your heart. Yeah, I remember that song. That was I liked that song back in college.
Yeah. You weren't in college on this in
2010. No, I guess that's true. It was I still liked it when I as a freshman on campus. But you're right, I was still in high school. I was finishing up my senior year.
You weren't in college yet. So, you were still in the high school.
I was always a few months late to the songs that were topping the charts back then.
Oh,
so to be fair,
always late to everything that's popular.
I probably didn't hear it until I was in college.
Yeah. So I looked on the GDOT website this afternoon. 1 gallon of regular gas in March 2010 was $2.65, and March of 2021 it's $2.57.
Yeah, it's actually gone down since then.
Yeah.
Although apparently it's going up again. Thanks, Biden.
Yeah, we've been through some stuff to make the gas prices fluctuate a little bit.
Yes, we have.
I don't know if you've noticed, but there's been a pandemic. This was in Obama's first term.
Yep.
So that was 2 presidents ago now.
Yeah, just over a year into it. So it was early in his first term.
His hair was still black, right? It's young looking. The newest iPhone at the time was the iPhone 3GS, the sort of curvy backed one.
I think I had an Envy, like an LG Envy, like the NV3 or something.
Flip phone.
Yeah, mine was like one of those that like flipped both ways. I could have a QWERTY keyboard or the 9-button keyboard.
Yeah, I had both of those too. The funky flip phone where you could text with the keypad. Yeah, I didn't get my first iPhone until 2011. So, it's been a little while since. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since and Apple was still making iPods. They weren't discontinued until July 27th of 2017.
Did Georgia Tech win any games in?
We beat I want to say Oklahoma State in the first round. We upset them, and then we lost to Ohio State in the second round.
Man, you guys couldn't even beat Ohio State. They lost to Oral Roberts.
Well, that Ohio State team had Evan Turner on it.
Future #2 pick in the draft, baby.
There you go.
Is he still in the NBA?
I think he just retired because the funny thing is, Bomani Jones does like every once in a while he'll do like where he has his producer they list 10 guys and he has to answer whether or not they're still in the NBA. And just a couple of weeks ago, he asked him, "Is Evan Turner still in the NBA?" Bomani assumed he was, but he's not. He retired this season.
Oh, wow. So he's had an entire NBA career. Well, congratulations to Evan Turner.
Good timing on that question on Bomani Jones's show because it allows us to pull a little trivia into this one.
Yeah. So, long story short, it's been a little while since Tech's been in the tournament. Hopefully, we don't make this a, whatever the word is for every 11 years thing.
Yeah, I don't know what that word would be, but Maryland on the men's side beat UConn in the first round, 63-54. Played a really good game against UConn. I mean, I think I can't speak for you, Evan, but Eric and I were on the chats, and we were certainly a little bit nervous, in the last 5 to 10 minutes, just because it's Maryland basketball and you never know what's going to happen. Once you see Miracle Minute happen, you kind of lose your faith in closing out games for the rest of your life. You're always a little bit on the edge of your seat, but we played very well in that game. I was really impressed with them. That was the first full game I've watched Maryland's basketball team play this season. And, I haven't watched a lot of any other games either. I've seen very little. So I was impressed, with their work. I was impressed with some of the players. Unfortunately, that did not last because on Monday night, we lost to Alabama 96-77 because Alabama just could not miss from three. They shot like 48% from three. They made, I think, 16 3-pointers. They out-rebounded us by 21 rebounds, including a 15-4 margin on the offensive glass. So, it was nice while it lasted. We won the first game, and that's something Maryland does. We've made it to the tournament 27 times, and we've won in the first round 24 times. So it generally hasn't mattered if we're, a higher seed or a lower seed. We win the first game, the trouble comes after that.
Yeah, well, that doesn't help when you're a 10 seed. You're not setting yourself up for a long run when you immediately have to go up against probably a top 5 team in the country in the second round.
And as Mark Turgeon put them, the 5th number 1.
Yeah, I mean, that Bama team was really, really good. And the Terps probably had no shot to win, regardless of how well they shot, just because they had just too much talent and just a better team in general. But, the UConn game was sort of what I thought could have happened, because whenever I hear a team has one scorer that's just so good and somebody's going to have to guard him, it's like, well, we have Daryl Morcell. So he's going to erase your guy because he's better at defense than your guy is at offense, unless your guy is Cade Cunningham. So it was pretty clear that Daryl was going to be able to lock him up, and he did. James Bouknight was pretty much completely ineffective. He was terrible all game, did absolutely nothing on the court to make me think that was a future NBA player, and he is. So that speaks to how great the Maryland defense was against him, and nobody else could benefit from anything that Bouknight did in terms of creation. It was just a great overall team defensive effort, which is something the Terps have done all year. It's been their way of winning basketball games pretty much all season, and even back last season when there wasn't an NCAA tournament. This has been a defense-focused team simply because, especially this year, the team had no true point guard. They had Akeem Hart and Eric Ayala running the point, but neither of those guys are natural point guards. They had a thin rotation. By the end of the season, they were only playing 8 guys a game, which is what they did in the tournament because the younger guys simply weren't there or not good enough to be able to contribute in any meaningful way in big games. But they managed to scrap despite the fact that they were a little bit under-talented, a little bit undersized, not having a whole lot of depth, and they were able to make a run in the NCAA tournament and got a win. Obviously weren't going to compete with the likes of Alabama, but that's okay too. I mean, they had a good showing against a Power 5, although technically UConn's not a Power 5 conference team, but they are of that ilk. They are a well-regarded basketball program. I think that's the first time in the Turgeon era that the Terps have actually beaten, a team of that caliber in the NCAA tournament. So it was a nice win. Wish it could have lasted a little longer, but,
Yeah. You still there?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
It sounded like you were going to continue. I wasn't.
I mean, I got nothing more to say.
Okay.
And
Your camera's been frozen for over an hour, so
I mean, I don't know what to do about that. I do know what to do about that, but I'm not going to do it. So, I will say this though, for those of you that are critical of individuals who, might not really like their coach, even though they make the tournament, because being one of 68 teams is apparently something to be proud of when you're a basketball school. I am not calling for Mark Turgeon to be fired. But I also don't particularly want him to be the face of the program long term, simply because he's had 10 years. and it's been a pretty mediocre 10 years, and I think it's okay to say we could do better. So,
Oh, okay. It's a I would have loved a mediocre 10 years out of Georgia Tech the last 10 years.
well, I'm sorry
How
that
great,
your
how
program
great we would have been if we were mediocre for 10 years rather than, just trying to stay out of 15th place and not get invited to the ACC Big Ten Challenge because the Big Ten is 14 and the ACC is 15 for basketball. So they just leave the crap 15th place team out. Like, oh, we should fire this guy. We just made the tournament. Like, yeah, you made the tournament. Congratulations. Unbelievable. You sound like the Lions when they fired Jim Caldwell. Like, oh, this guy, he only went 9-7, and we made the playoffs. We can do better, so let's hire Matt Patricia.
Well, the difference between the Maryland Terrapins basketball program and the Detroit Lions is that the Maryland Terrapins basketball program has a pedigree of success, whereas the Lions haven't won anything since the 50s. So, little apples to oranges comparison there.
Because Maryland has won so many championships.
They've won more than the Lions have.
The Lions won an NFL championship in 1957.
When nobody cared. Yeah, okay.
When nobody cared.
Yeah, pre-Super Bowl
I'm
era.
sure somebody cared.
Doesn't matter.
Super Bowl era.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. And even if you just look at championships, that's ridiculous. You have to look beyond that too. The Terps were a regular team in the Sweet 16 under Gary Williams. They were a regular national contender with Lefty Driesell. They have a history of being a top-flight basketball program, and simply settling for being, a fringe at-large team in the NCAA tournament, frankly, isn't good enough.
Well, if that's your conclusion, then what should they do?
They should find somebody that's a better coach.
Okay, how do they go about that?
They go hire somebody that's not mediocre at their job.
Okay.
Yeah, usually the way you go about that is, you bring people in and you interview them and you look at their record.
Do you have any suggestions? Anybody you're realistically hoping they get?
Sure, there's a couple of guys out there. There's the dude from Loyola Chicago. I mean, that guy's a good coach, but why would he stay there? That's a mediocre basketball outfit. He's not going to be able to get great talent there. I mean, they play in the Missouri Valley Conference. I mean, he's got opportunities to move on and do bigger and better things, and maybe he wants to coach in the Big Ten, which apparently isn't that good, but they look good in the regular season. Something.
That's something we need to discuss, too. What happened to the Big Ten?
They suck.
Last week we're on here, we were like, oh, well, the Big Ten, they're going to have 4 teams in the Final Four, all of them from the Big Ten, because the Big Ten's so great, and the Big Ten this, Big Ten that, and the Big Ten just took a big all over.
Loyola Chicago just beat the best team in the Big Ten.
Who was
Illinois.
I feel like
maybe Michigan is better. I don't know, but they beat a 1 seed from the Big Ten.
I would say that Illinois, given that the way they were playing, was definitely a bigger threat than Michigan. But I also believe that Loyola Chicago was underseeded. I think that was a made-for-TV matchup scheduling thing there where they wanted the Illinois versus Loyola Chicago thing going on. I feel like Loyola Chicago probably should have been a 6 or a 7 seed at the very least. But, hey, this is March Madness. This almost is made up as college football. I mean, they just kind of throw the teams out there and they say, hey, go play. So, I mean, if you're a national title contender like Illinois was supposed to be, you don't get to crying your Cheerios because you lost to an 8 seed that maybe should have been a 6. Because if you can't beat a 6, you're not going to beat Baylor or Gonzaga.
Yep. We saw, I believe, the first ever canceled NCAA tournament game outside of, the entire tournament last year. With Oregon advancing over VCU in the first round in a no contest because VCU had some COVID issues. So that was interesting. And then we had plenty of upsets in that first round. So among them, Maryland over UConn, which all 3 of us had. Rutgers over Clemson, which all 3 of us had. Then you had Ohio over Virginia, which Evan had. North Texas over Purdue, which I had. Oregon State over Tennessee, another one that Evan had. Syracuse over San Diego State, which I was the only one who didn't have. But then you also had a few that none of us had. None of us had UCLA beating BYU. UCLA won their play-in game to even get to that point. And none of us had Oral Roberts over Ohio State. And
why would we? Right?
Yeah, because
that's crazy.
None of us had Abilene Christian over Texas. I'd be interested to know if there were any other games outside of these ones that stood out to you guys. For me, it would probably be Colgate against Arkansas, because I picked that upset. I picked Colgate to win that game, and I was feeling pretty good about it when they were up by 14 points with less than 10 minutes to go in the first half. But then Arkansas went on like a 19-0 run and took a pretty big lead into halftime. And then Colgate actually took the lead back early in the second half, but Arkansas won by like 17 points.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the toothpaste fell apart. I was feeling good about that pick.
It dried up.
Yeah, it was not great at all. They got up 33-19, and they just completely forgot how to play basketball. They fell apart 100%.
Everybody squeezed it all out.
Yeah, couldn't put the toothpaste back in that tube. Let's get all of our toothpaste related metaphors or puns or analogies or whatever out of the way with.
They weren't fresh late in the game.
No, they were not. But I don't know. Like it's hard to look at that game and say, man, Colgate really let me down, because they were a 14 seed.
Well, sure.
It's like, should we really have even picked them? I mean, I still felt pretty good about it. Like, obviously, I felt okay about the pick, and what I saw on the court certainly indicated that Colgate could have won, but they didn't win. So, I can't be that pissed about a 14 seed losing in the NCAA tournament. That's what's supposed to happen.
The funny thing is that now Arkansas gets to play a 15 seed this weekend, because Oral Roberts is in the Sweet 16.
My goodness.
I mean, I'm the idiot who picked Iona to beat Alabama. Because I know Rick Pitino is a Hall of Fame coach. And
well, that game was also. I mean, that game was pretty close down to the last 7 or 8 minutes when Alabama finally pulled away. Alabama only made 5 3-pointers in that game, and then made 16 of them against Maryland.
Yeah. Alabama's coach beclowned himself with some dumb comments. I want to say back in December or something.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, like it was on the Kornheiser show. They're like, "Who was Nate Oates? Who's this guy?" I think he was talking about Coach K's back then.
Yeah.
Sucking, and Duke's bad now. Coach K's back hurts. Big surprise there.
It was funny though.
It was funny, but like if you're a coach of another Division I program, that's not what you're supposed to say.
No, not at all.
And he doesn't exactly have the stature that his colleague Nick Saban does, for example.
No, nobody does.
Right. So, I was thinking, well, this guy's a clown, and Pitino's a good coach who's, managed to have scandal follow him wherever he goes. But, I thought that was an upset, and, that didn't happen. Alabama's legit.
Pitino was the best coach in the tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, he's easily the best coach in the tournament.
I picked Iona to win 2 games.
It's funny because some people want Rick Pitino to coach their basketball team, and apparently Rick Pitino said not interested. He's fine living the life at the small college now at this point in his career. He doesn't want to be back in the big time. I guess he's concerned he might get in trouble again.
Like Jim Calhoun, he's coaching some little school somewhere.
Yeah, another guy who got in trouble with the NCAA and just, found a little place to hole up for a while before he decides to hang it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, goodness gracious. Just word to the wise out there, if you're ever invited to a bracket pool and, it costs some money, just take that money and go in the bathroom and throw it in the toilet and flush instead. That's a better investment. Right. This has been an unmitigated disaster.
Yes, this is why I do not do money pools for this. I love doing it for fun, but I will never join a money pool that I have to pay money to join.
You're a smart person, Corey.
The NCAA tournament makes me feel good because I don't really pay that close attention to the entirety of college basketball for most of the season. Like, it's usually around this time where it's like, oh, who's good? Let's start thinking about who you're going to pick for your brackets. And then I see everybody else that invest so much time and energy into this and thinking their bracket's going to be amazing, and their brackets suck just as bad as mine.
Right.
Because they thought they had all these clever upsets picked, and it turns out they picked all the wrong ones because the ones that you actually expect to happen don't happen because there's a reason why they're called upsets. You just don't see them coming. Like, nobody saw what happened with Oral Roberts and Ohio State coming. Nobody picked that. And, but then again, everybody thought maybe Colgate could win, maybe Iona could win.
A lot of people had USCB beating Creighton. I had that one. That didn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, because the thing is, everybody's like, there's always so many upsets in the NCAA tournament. I'm like, there's also a lot of not upsets, so you have to pick the right ones.
Yep.
Like, if you sit there hunting them and you get them all wrong, your bracket's screwed.
Yep. So 2 games in the whole tournament, both of them in the first round, were decided by a single point. One of them was the aforementioned USCB against Creighton game that Creighton pulled out. And the other one was Abilene Christian beating Texas by a single point. So those ones were really exciting, came down to the wire. We've also had a few 2- and 3-point games mixed in. But I don't know if there are other games that really stood out to you guys from the first round.
I only watched the Georgia Tech game closely. I mean, I've been playing a lot of Roller Coaster Tycoon the last, 8 months or so. So, like, I have, that game on one of my screens and then the basketball on another screen, just kind of loosely following. Certainly once my bracket was set on fire. Thanks a lot, Iowa. Way to go. I didn't know that y'all didn't play any defense over there. I had no idea.
I knew that.
I didn't. So, that was dumb. There goes all of my money. But I have won one of these pools before, so my thinking is that I'm still plus overall. Right. So, there's that.
Yeah. The one thing I can take away from the first 2 rounds is that I feel pretty good about is I had USC pegged. I thought I knew that they were going to match up against Kansas in the second round, and I had them winning that one, and I felt really, really good about that pick, and they made me look good on that one because I think they won by like 19 points. It was pretty much a blowout, but everything else, clearly, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing because reasons. But I'll also give Gonzaga a lot of credit in all the fever of upset nature going on right now. There's just absolutely no way they were going to lose either of their games. They were clearly the better team, even after a little bit of a slow start against Oklahoma. I mean, they are the cream of the crop. They're the team to beat, and I hope they win because I like Mark Few, and they've been there a lot and just haven't quite gotten there. But this feels like it could be the year for them. But they got 4 more games to go, and we don't know what the hell is going to happen for those either.
Yep. Some upsets from the second round. One of them Eric actually had was USC over Kansas.
Like I said, that's all I had. That's my crowning moment of awesome for this tournament.
Yep.
Walk out on that one. That's my high note.
Yep. Meanwhile, none of us had Loyola Chicago over Illinois. None of us had Oregon State over Oklahoma State. None of us had Syracuse over West Virginia. And none of us had Oral Roberts over Florida. So plenty of upsets still potentially in the making. Looking at our bracket challenge as a whole, let's start with some shout-outs for some people who joined our contest, in particular the Shermans. A couple of friends of Rashonda's. Kyle Sherman won the first round with 24 correct picks out of 32. He has since slipped back to a tie for 6th, and his max total isn't looking that great, but his wife, Emily, got 9 of the 16 second-round winners correct, and so now leads the overall competition with 380 points. So the 2 of them are doing really well. The highest potential point total entering the Sweet 16 belongs to the Zattlestay 1 bracket with 1,530 potential points. I don't know whose bracket that is, so if you're a listener and that's your bracket, be sure to let us know so we can give you a proper shout out next week. If your bracket is in good standing still, you can also change your bracket name to something that will help us to identify you. Just go into your bracket and then hit the gear for your settings and change your bracket name. But looking at the 3 of us, Eric currently leads us with 350 points. Evan is in second with 300 points, but he's tied for 21st overall and has the lowest max out of us with 580 potential points. Meanwhile, I am tied for last with 290 points. But again, like Eric kind of alluded to earlier, I don't pay any attention to NCAA basketball, but I have the highest potential score out of the three of us with 930 potential points, and that is because where Eric has lost his champion, Illinois, and Evan has lost his champion, Iowa, Baylor is still very much alive for me. I've lost my other three Final Four teams, but my champion is still there. So it's a total crapshoot. That's how this is, but it's fun, and I get to talk trash to my co-hosts potentially if Baylor continues to remain alive.
Yeah, I mean, this will make somebody say, why do these guys host a podcast? They don't know anything about college basketball.
And they'd be right. We have no business talking about this, but it's March Madness.
That's why we're only talking about it right now. We barely even acknowledge that college basketball exists outside of March.
I mean, that's the mistake that college basketball has made, is that it's irrelevant outside of these 2 weeks.
Basically,
like the whole point is to get to the tournament. And again, all those regular season games, we know all the good teams are going to the tournament. Usually, if you're Kentucky
or Duke,
Sorry,
Rashonda.
Oh boy, man, smell that? It was Duke and Kentucky this year. My goodness gracious, they both lost games to Georgia Tech this year. Imagine that.
But like I said, even the junkies that watch college basketball religiously, they still don't know what the hell's going to happen either, because it's just a goofy tournament, man. Like, it's, again, you're throwing 67 games out there and you're just going to see what happens. I mean,
single elimination.
Yeah, you got 40 minutes to survive in advance or go home, and anybody can get got at any time. So that's
sort of the COVID factor.
Yeah, and the fact that certain teams, like, there used to be a bit of a home court advantage for higher seeds. Yeah. Like, you would have Duke or North Carolina playing in Greensboro, or I think when Maryland was a 1 seed back in 2002, they played their first 2 rounds in D.C. Yep. So, I mean, like, there is a little bit of that built-in advantage for the higher seeds, and it's by design, whereas that didn't happen at all this year. It was all in one place. So,
well, Purdue was in the tournament, and they basically played a home game, and they lost.
I mean,
they're out.
Yep, they're gone. Sucks. But
Jay Billis said something in one show I was listening to, maybe it was ESPN Daily, to this effect, where, like, he fills out one bracket where, he doesn't think about it for more than a second between picks. Like, he just writes whatever pops in his head. And then he fills out another one where, he thinks about it and analyzes, because he's a college basketball analyst and he played college basketball. He knows what's going on. The one where he thinks about it, he doesn't do any better. Like, it's still the same result. It's still terrible.
Yeah, I don't support filling out a second bracket, but for that particular purpose, to try to kind of have a control group almost and compare the two, I think that's an interesting exercise.
Yeah, so not something I'm going to bother doing.
Yeah, so just in the future, if you do decide to participate in this foolishness, just write a name on the line and move on. For whatever reason, right? Maybe your baseball team's top prospect went to Oregon State, and that's why you picked up. So, shout out Adley Rutschman.
Yep.
I was just gonna say, is that an Adley Rutschman reference?
And yes, that's the only reason. Like, I'm going with the Beavers. Sure.
Well, the one thing that I hate about the NCAA tournament, though, is that typically when you have a weekend where there's a lot of upsets, the quality of the first weekend in terms of the magic of the NCAA tournament usually results in pretty mediocre second and third weekends, because you've got a bunch of teams that got here via miracle and they're playing each other, and it's just like, and then it kind of shows the next weekend where it feels like you would have preferred to see the more talented teams there as a showcase, just so you don't get bogged down with sometimes not great basketball. Hopefully that won't be the case this time, but that's kind of why, like, first couple rounds, it's like wonderful to watch, to see all these different schools and all their stories and how the hell they got here and when was the last time they were here, and they won their little conference or whatever, and they're putting up a fight against the big
won
dogs.
the ACC.
Yeah. Although Georgia Tech would have made it even if they didn't win the ACC tournament, they were good enough to be an at-large team. But then you get to the second round and say, okay, this is where you kind of want to see the best teams and the best players. And I feel like sometimes we lose a little bit of that because of all of the upsets that we see. And then it's like, wow, now I'm watching 8 more games in the Sweet 16 and they all stink. Like, that's no fun.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally you do get some lower seeds who make it out of the first weekend and continue to play well. I mean, we've had a few 11 seeds make it to the Final Four. Loyola Chicago, of course, was the most recent one, and that was despite barely beating, I think it was Miami in the first round. And before that, VCU made it to the Final Four. I think George Mason was an 11 seed as well when they made it to the Final Four.
In 2006, they made it to the Final Four.
And I think there may have been 1 or 2 other teams who have done that. But yeah, I mean, you're right, Eric. Most of the time, those lower seeds who make it out of the first or even the second round tend to not make for particularly compelling matchups once you get to the Sweet 16.
And it's not even so much about the teams. It's like sometimes you just want to see the players. Like it doesn't even have to be like an NBA prospect. Like the best tournament that I remember was the 2013 tournament where Louisville beat Michigan in the final. And what made that tournament so special was, aside from that, Louisville was great, and obviously what happened to Kevin Ware was, added to that run for them. Yeah. But also on Michigan's side, Trey Burke was just destroying people. And it was great to watch him just put Michigan on his back and carry them. But when you lose out on having guys like that lose early and get upset, it kind of takes away a little bit of the fun in the later rounds where it's like the business end of the tournament. And so maybe somebody will step up and be able to be that guy for some of these lower seeds. And I know that there's a lot of talents on some of these lower seeds, and they could potentially become household names in the tournament. But
like Ja Morant did a couple years ago.
But the thing is,
Stephen Curry.
Yes.
Whatever happened to him?
I don't know. He's so hopefully he's had a nice little career somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Maybe in Europe or something.
Yeah. Oh, my God. All right, so that pretty much wraps up everything on our list of topics for this week. Talked about a lot of different things. If you managed to stick with us for this entire roughly 2-hour show, make sure that you drop us a like on Facebook or Twitter or whatever podcast service you're listening to. You can leave us a review. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I don't know if the other podcast services allow you to drop reviews, but if you're listening on Apple, leave us a rating and a review. Make sure you follow us.
We'll read your review on here.
Yeah, we will. We will absolutely read it on here. Like us on or follow us on Twitter. We are at Sportsballers18. You can also find us individually. I'm at Cory Puffett. Eric is at Quagmire67, and Evan is at Evan_Ash13. If you have topics that you want to hear us discuss on the show, email them to thesportsballers@gmail.com. We check our email frequently, and when we have stuff, we're always sure to add it to our mailbag. And if it's something we weren't already planning to talk about, we will look into it, research it, and bring it up on the show. So definitely want to have some fan input here if you listen to us. Any shout-outs from either of you guys?
I just want to update the Orioles trail the Red Sox 2-0 in the 7th inning. And Georgia Tech women's basketball is playing #1 South Carolina on Sunday. So that's probably not going to work out so great. But, congratulations to the Lady Yellow Jackets for going to the Sweet 16.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's the end of the run. They're legit.
Any shout-outs for you, Eric?
Rest in peace to the great Elgin Baylor, who passed away earlier this week. I think yesterday.
Yeah.
Longtime Laker, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest scorers in NBA history, and probably the greatest player to ever come out of Washington, D.C. He was 86 years old, but he will be missed nonetheless. He's an absolute NBA legend, and I think it's good for people to go back in time and reminisce about some of the great players that maybe they didn't see. Elgin Baylor was absolutely one of them. So look him up, and rest in peace.
All right. And the only thing I think for me is, go Lady Terps next weekend when they jump into the Sweet 16. Still don't know who their matchup is going to be against, but hopefully they play well and manage to pull that game out and continue in their journey through the NCAA tournament.
Why don't we know who they're playing?
Because I think the other team they're playing is playing later. The game is later today to determine who will play them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that'll do it for episode 136 of the Sportsballers podcast. We thank you all for listening, especially if you made it all the way through the show. Again, make sure you find us on social media, like us, follow us, leave us a review, and all that good stuff. Wash your hands, wear a mask, especially if you have not been vaccinated yet. But just even if you have been vaccinated, whether you're wearing a mask or not, whatever the CDC guidelines are, make sure that you're respectful of other people's space and making sure that you're allowing other people to feel safe and comfortable outside, because it's going to take a lot of time for some people to get used to that again. For Eric and Evan, my name is Cory Puffett. Again, thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to talking with you guys again next week.